Courts and judges are at the center of every legal system. People ask questions like, where does the trial take place? Or who decides the verdict? In today's lesson, you will learn the vocabulary and grammar to explain courts, judges, and trials in simple, professional, legal English. By the end of this lesson, you'll use vocabulary like court, judge, trial, verdict, sentence, appeal, jurisdiction, witness, and defendant. Ask and answer questions in the present simple like who decides the verdict? And explain legal phrases like trial by jury and appeal a case. And also, you will tell a short story about a case using today's language. Imagine this: a person is accused of a crime. The case goes to court. The family asks, where is the trial? The lawyer replies, the trial is in the district court. They ask, who is the judge? The lawyer explains, the judge is Miss Rivera. She decides the sentence. At the end, they ask, what is the verdict? The lawyer answers, the verdict is guilty. This story shows how simple vocabulary and questions are used to describe courts and judges. A court is the official place where legal cases are heard and decided. It is not only a physical building, but also a legal institution. For example, the trial is in court. Imagine a lawyer meets a client and explains, your case will be in the civil court downtown. The word court can mean the room where the trial happens, the building itself, or the larger system of justice. In many countries, there are different courts: civil courts, criminal courts, labor courts, family courts. Each court has its own type of case. A judge is the person in charge of the courtroom. The judge makes sure the trial is fair, listens to both sides, and makes decisions according to the law. For example, the judge listens to both sides. Imagine in a criminal case, the judge controls the courtroom, asks lawyers to follow the rules, and finally decides the sentence if the defendant is guilty. In a civil case, the judge may decide who wins the dispute between two companies. Judges represent the authority of the law. A trial is the official process in court where evidence is presented, witnesses speak, lawyers make arguments, and the judge or jury makes a decision. For example, the trial starts on Monday. Imagine the lawyers stand, one for the defendant and one for the prosecution. A witness tells their story, documents are shown. The judge listens carefully. The process of presenting and deciding is the trial. A verdict is the official decision at the end of a trial. It tells whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. For example, the verdict is not guilty. Let's look at a story. After many days in court, everyone waits for the final words. The judge, or in some countries, the jury, announces the verdict is guilty. This single word, guilty or not guilty, changes the life of the defendant completely. A sentence is the punishment the court gives after a guilty verdict. It can mean time in prison, a fine, or another penalty. For example, the judge gave a 5-year sentence. Let's imagine a story. A man is found guilty of fraud. The judge announces, your sentence is 2 years in prison and a fine of $5,000. This word is important to understand clearly. In legal English, sentence means punishment, not a sentence of words. To appeal means to ask a higher court to review and possibly change the decision of a lower court. For example, the lawyer will appeal the case. Let's imagine a defendant is unhappy with the verdict. He doesn't agree. The lawyer explains we can appeal to a higher court. That court may confirm the decision, reduce the sentence, or reverse the ruling. Appeals are very common in both civil and criminal law, and they are a key part of justice. Jurisdiction means the legal authority of a court to hear and decide a case. Not every court can decide every type of case. For example, this court has jurisdiction over the dispute. Imagine a company from another country is sued. The lawyer checks. Does this court have jurisdiction, or should the case go to another court? Jurisdiction decides where a case belongs and which court has the power to decide it. A witness is someone who saw or knows something important about the case. The witness gives testimony or speaks in court about what they know. For example, the witness gave testimony in court. Imagine a woman saw an accident on the street. Later, she goes to court and says, I saw the car go through the red light. The lawyers ask questions and the judge listens. Witnesses help the court find the truth. The defendant is the person accused in a criminal case or the person being sued in a civil case. For example, the defendant has a lawyer. Imagine, in a criminal trial, the defendant sits beside their lawyer. The prosecutor says the defendant committed a crime. The defendant says they are innocent. The trial will decide. Sometimes there is one defendant, sometimes there are many. The word always refers to the person who must defend themselves in court. In legal English, we often need to ask very clear questions. The present simple helps us do this. Use who to ask about a person or people with responsibility. Who decides the verdict, the judge or the jury? Who gives the sentence, the judge? Use where to ask about the place or location. Where does the trial take place? In the criminal court, the civil court, or sometimes the Supreme Court. Where does the witness sit? In the witness box. Use what to ask about actions or things. What does the judge do? The judge listens, decides, and announces the ruling. What does the witness say? The witness says what they saw or heard. These simple question words, who, where, what, let you talk about courts and trials step by step. Now, let's see these questions in real legal situations. A client asks, who decides the sentence? You explain, the judge decides the sentence. They ask, where does the appeal go? You answer, the appeal goes to a higher court or appellate court. Finally, they ask, what does the witness say? You reply, the witness says what they saw or heard. Each question word has its role. Who? Person with authority. Who decides? Where is place? Where does it happen? What? Action or content. What happens? What is said? These question forms are simple, but they are very powerful for explaining courts and judges in English. A trial by jury is when ordinary citizens, not just the judge, decide the verdict. The jury listens to the evidence and arguments during the trial and then says guilty or not guilty. For example, there is a trial by jury in the case. Imagine in some countries, 12 citizens sit in the courtroom. They listen to the lawyers, witnesses, and judge. At the end, They go to a private room and discuss the case. Together, they decide the verdict is guilty or the verdict is not guilty. The judge then gives the sentence based on their decision. Trial by jury is often seen as a symbol of democracy because it lets citizens take part in justice. To appeal a case means to ask a higher court to review and possibly change the decision of a lower court. For example, the lawyer will appeal the case. Imagine a defendant receives a 10-year sentence. The lawyer thinks the punishment is too heavy or the trial was unfair. The lawyer tells the family, "We are going to appeal this case to the Court of Appeals." A higher court will review the process, the evidence, and the sentence. Sometimes the higher court confirms the decision. Sometimes it reduces the punishment, and sometimes it cancels the verdict completely. Judicial independence means judges decide cases only according to the law, not because of pressure from politicians, companies, or public opinion. For example, judicial independence is important in every country. Imagine a judge is deciding a case against a very powerful company. Politicians want the judge to protect the company. Citizens protest and want the opposite. Judicial independence means the judge ignores both pressures and looks only at the evidence and the law. Without judicial independence, the court system loses credibility, and justice is not fair. A court ruling is the official, written, or spoken decision of a court at the end of a case. It explains who wins, who loses, and what must happen next. For example, the court ruling was in favor of the company. Imagine, after months of hearings, the judge announces the ruling of the court is that the company must pay damages to the workers. The ruling becomes an official record. Lawyers and parties use the court ruling as proof of the decision, and in many countries, rulings can be published for future cases to follow as precedent. The presiding judge is the main judge who leads the trial and is responsible for managing the case. For example, the presiding judge opened the trial. Imagine in a court with three judges. One sits in the middle and speaks for the panel. This person is the presiding judge. They open the hearings, give instructions to lawyers and witnesses, and announce the court's ruling. Even if several judges are present, the presiding judge represents the authority of the court. Let's finish with the full story that brings everything together. A man is accused of fraud, and the case goes to court. The defendant sits with his lawyer. The family asks, "Who decides the case?" The lawyer replies, "The presiding judge is Mr. Hernandez. He is in charge of the trial." This time, there's also a trial by jury. 12 citizens listen to the witnesses and the evidence. At the end, the jury announces the verdict is guilty. The judge then gives the sentence 3 years in prison. The official court ruling explains why the decision was made. It is read aloud in court and written for the record. The lawyer tells the family, "We do not agree with the sentence. We are going to appeal the case to a higher court." In the background, people talk about the importance of judicial independence. Even if the defendant is famous, the judges and jury must decide only by law and evidence, not by pressure. This story used today's vocabulary: court, judge, trial, verdict, sentence, appeal, jurisdiction, witness, defendant, and today's grammar with simple questions. Who decides? Where does the trial take place? And what does the witness say? And today's legal phrases: trial by jury, appeal a case, judicial independence, court ruling, and presiding judge. It shows how to explain a full case step by step in clear legal English. So today you learned vocabulary about courts and trials, grammar to ask and answer present simple questions, and legal phrases that describe important parts of court systems, and a story showing how to connect everything in a real case. So now you can describe courts and judges in professional legal English.